And welcome back to space, as in space weather. We're looking at the sun at 193 angstroms here. We see a bunch of diffuse coronal holes rotating into the Earth-facing area just north of the South Pole. Now, we see no sunspots. We see a little bit of activity on the solar polar fields, some brightness up there, a little bit of X-ray production coming out of the North Pole especially. It looks like the North Pole field is strengthening. Radio flux back up to 69. That's a 28 megahertz radio flux, by the way, or you could call it the 10.7. Now, yesterday we reported on the coronal mass ejection that we saw. Let's first look at the view from stereo A. Now, we saw this kicking off yesterday, and we reported on it, of course, long before NASA or NOAA or any other YouTube channels did, or any other channels, period. Anyway, there's that coronal mass ejection. That is somewhat Earth-facing, as this view is from stereo A. There probably is some minor Earth-facing component to that. Let's look at the view from SOHO. Now, this one is not at stereo A. This one is located right between the Earth and Sun, Lagrange point 1. And right at the very end, you can see that coronal mass ejection. It looks like it's going to largely miss to the west. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if there was an Earth-facing component to that from the way it appeared at stereo A. We don't see a classic halo. Another thing to remember is that there is going to be an electron bridge in between Earth and the Sun following that last coronal hole wind stream, as we still have elevated solar wind speeds right now, and this could help to focus that plasma at the Earth. Here's the 304 angstrom view. We do see a large set of filaments there up in the northwest. Let's zoom in on that. Here's the bright region I was talking about in the North Polar Field, right there. And we do see other data suggesting that the North Solar Polar Field is strengthening. That is a good thing, folks. Now, we did see a little uptick in X-rays also, so I broke out the X-ray imager here. I'll just rock that back and forth so you can see a bunch of interference kicking in, perhaps cosmic ray flux. But in any case, we do see some additional X-rays coming out of the sun. There's a small active region rising there. No magnetic organization really happening. And we'll let that play through once, complete with time and date stamps. That's the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard, if you're wondering. By the way, folks, the GOES X-ray imager. And there you can see that small uptick in the X-ray flux, not quite getting into a B-class X-ray range. And let's move on to the real-time solar wind, which is showing a currently shifting phi angle. Looks like a fleeting connection to that coronal hole system. No surprise if that would connect again at any moment. Solar wind density 2.36 protons per cubic centimeter. And solar wind speed remains elevated following that coronal hole wind stream at 579 kilometers per second. And there's the data from ACE corroborating that discovered data. And we did see some small inductive spikes in the power grid. Let me shrink that down. There we go. We'll let that play through. We saw it get up to 43 megavolts per kilometer there. About a half an hour after we saw a geoelectric spike come through, and one that's not really associated with much of anything. We'll break it down in a minute. First, let's talk about the power grid. Looks like PG&E is going to break some more records, and they're not good records, as they expect to have 2.5 million customers with no power for days. In California, every time the wind blows, it becomes Venezuela. Their stock price has not been benefiting from the recent multi-billion-dollar fires caused by a lack of servicing their infrastructure. And of course, PG&E is not allowed to clear cut around their power lines because of idiotic forest management laws in California. The wildfires are not caused by global warming, folks. Anyway, there's the threat map. We've also left links to this Zero Hedge article below the video. So after you become our next patron, click on the article and Zero Hedge will tell you all about it. We've also brought up the PG&E outage center map, and we've linked this below the video as well. The current situation is looking pretty smooth there, actually. Not really a lot of outages at all. And let's move on to the geospace magnetosphere movies, as we saw some spikes just coming in around 7 o'clock UTC. Here's the velocity, and there's that spike we were talking about. It looks like a density spike, but we don't really see the uptick in density on the solar wind data. Probably an increase in the North Pole field, but we'll be looking at the Gong 2 in a minute. And there's the density data. Here's that spike coming in, a sudden density spike, or an apparent density spike, perhaps a magnetic wave, followed by low density, followed by more high density. Keep in mind on the density graph here, this is showing low density as white, high density as dark blue. And here's the pressure. Again, you're going to see that big geoelectric spike come in at right around 7 o'clock. Wait for it. There it is. And we see continued oddities in the shape of the magnetohydrodynamic pressure, especially visible on the equatorial plane view. And let's look at the ground geospace magnetic perturbations. First at the poles. There's 4 hours of data at the poles. You're going to see that geoelectric spike come in right there around 7. Let me just pause that there to look at that moment. It looks like the main perturbations there are actually over the Siberian pole and coming out of the north and not the south this time. Anyway, here's the way it plays out over the global scale. I'll bring that to the beginning for you. So Siberian pole gets a spike and the Canadian pole does not receive quite as much of a spike there. Always interesting to watch the way these things play out with a pole shift going on. 10.7 centimeter radial flux back up to 69, so just underneath that orange line we've drawn in, which represents 70 solar flux units regarding the 10.7 centimeter radial flux. Magnetometer is still looking pretty spiky, and we are remaining solidly in the solar polar north pole associated portion of the current sheet as it has extended. And you can see in the Gong 2 here, this data hardly an hour old, not even an hour old. And if you're wondering when we made the video, it's 4:35 a.m. Do you know where your magnetism is? Bring it to the last frame here as we're expecting to remain in the North Pole oriented portion of the current sheet for an extended period of time. Check it out. It looks like the sun's fields have equaled out there according to these magnetometers. And if the North solar polar field is increasing in strength, that is a good thing. So we did get the KP all the way up to 6, exactly as we forecasted. As we saw, the initial impact of that stream looked pretty strong, and that was the forecast in this channel, KP is 6. Since then, we've been steady at KP3 for an extended period. We also saw an increase in the electron flux, also as forecasted. And we're not going to get into the physics of how that works. And notice the relativistic electrons are back up to quite high levels. No surprises there. And there are the charging hazards, and there are significant charging hazards, both over Australia and Oceania, and the Caribbean, Northern South America, and Central America. Next, we'll look at the ionosphere map. And the ionosphere map is looking quite charged up on the nighttime side. And that's no real surprise, especially with those geoelectric spikes coming in. Ooh, the ionosphere is looking quite anomalous right now, folks. We're seeing large charge ups in places where the sun is not located. And let's just put it on the latest image here. There's 5:30. There's 6 o'clock. There's 7 o'clock. And we do see a sudden charge up there over the Central Pacific. Anyway, there's the latest image. And it looks like it's simmered down a little bit in the past hour. As we did show prep, once again, stuff happening. Earthquake rundown, starting out with a 4.5 in Spain. First quake I've ever covered there. Let's look at the location. Check it out near Gibraltar. Please leave a comment if you've ever been a jabroni at Gibraltar. And back to the list. Let me zoom back in here. There we go. Next on the list is a 4.6 at El Salvador. That one coming in at 15:02 UTC yesterday. Next is a deep quake at Chile. Heads up Western South America. It's still my favorite place for the end of the 7 magnitude earthquake drought, which is going on for an extended period of time. Again, that's a deep quake, 141 kilometers at a 4.6 magnitude. Next quake is a 4.6 at Papua New Guinea. That one also at depth, followed by a 4.5 nearby at a deeper depth, 174 kilometers. 4.4 at Ecuador is next. That one coming in at 1810 UT. Nicaragua gets a 4.2 at 1820 UT. Here's a 4.7 at Japan, followed by a 4.8 at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, halfway around the world. Here's a 4.2 at Indonesia, 4.6 at Indonesia, 4.3 south of the Aleutians, as we've seen volcanic activity kick up, and the largest quake of the past 24 hours is at Unasca Island in the Aleutian Islands. Let's take a look at that. There's a location of that quake, and it looks like it's south of a bunch of volcanic islands. Let's hope a 5.8 magnitude quake is not the result of magmatic motions. And that quake came in at 41 minutes after 0 hour there. 0:41 UTC. Next on the list is a 4.8 at Colombia, followed by a deep quake at over 600 kilometers once again, south of Fiji. A 4.1, that one in southern Mexico. So if you're in an earthquake-prone area, folks, please have a plan. Please be an asset, not a liability in the event of a disaster. As if you're wondering who the cavalry is, it's probably because it's you. Here are the wind maps. Excuse me, pressure maps. And we'll let that play through about 24 hours. Check out the massive anticyclone right off the coast of Oregon there. It's more like, it's actually centered in British Columbia. See that massive clockwise rotation there in southwestern Canada. Followed by a powerful low. That low pressure system striking at the same point as the largest quake on the planet. I would also note a significant anticyclone / low pressure setup south of the equator. And let's move on to more information in the form of volcanoes. Let's see what's been erupting. Mount Aso, still going off, producing an 8,000-foot ash plume. Krakatoa, eruption reported by ground observer based on seismogram data. That's a scary volcano, Krakatoa, as it killed, what was it, 300 or 400 people with a tsunami earlier, late last year, I guess it was. Tokono, continuous emissions there. Sangay, emissions seen in satellite imagery. Revenador exploding, 15,000-foot ash plume there. Sambucaya, 27,000-foot ash plume there as it explodes also. Copahu and Novatos de Chilean were unable to detect based on satellite imagery there, but please do not attempt to do a back handspring over either of those calderas, as we need the views. Here's where stuff is in the solar system. There's where things will be in 1 week, as I say to you, Milky Way Galaxy team, for the win. Here's where stuff is above my head, theoretically. It's 4:07. It's 4:42. Do you know where your constellations are? Man, show prep took way too long today. We apologize for being so late coming out with the video. As Deneb is right on the horizon. Probably causing clouds to nucleate as its radio frequencies skip across the upper atmosphere. Anyway, there's the lightning maps, courtesy lightningmaps.org, and check it out. We got some sudden lightning kicking off here near the Canary Islands. What's up with that? A lone strike in the middle of nowhere. Are you familiar with the high point of Spain? Well, it's on the Canary Islands. Just saying. Anyway, lightningmaps.org. Check it out. Next time you hear thunder, you will be amazed at the detail you can get. And we got an atmospheric river forming here in the southeastern U.S. as it continues to snow and wintry mix in western Montana. Please leave a comment if you've been inundated by snow already. Well, it's not even November. And we've got a bunch of dry, massive air here sandwiching together some moisture right over Louisiana, Mississippi area. And that's going to be funneling all that moisture up into my neck of the woods, which is eastern Pennsylvania. Check out the way it's just deflecting off of that dry air there. And when you're looking at water vapor maps, folks, remember, the dry air is more massive and more in control than the moist air. As nitrogen is more massive than water vapor. And here's a zoom in of that compression zone there, right over Louisiana. And we see the standard perpendicular electromagnetic field force lines coming out of that, just as you would expect to see, perpendicular to the mode of travel of that water vapor. It's not a coincidence, folks. And it's not chemtrails. Next, we'll go to null school and look at the jets. There are the western jets. We do see a jet stream level anticyclone right over Greenland. And while that does not translate to surface winds, it indicates pressure, high pressure on the upper atmosphere. And check out the meridional jet stream flow, folks. You can expect them to be talking about record warm temperatures in England as a result of that jet stream flow. And here are the jets in the eastern world before we move on and close this thing out. Before I say thanks to the Smash team, thanks especially patrons, as you are the real associate producers of this channel, not YouTube, not Google. They pay us nothing. So check out patreon.com/smashomash to support the channel and increase the likelihood that these videos will not suddenly go out of existence. And here's the bonus feature. Looking at the north portion of the local yellow dwarf in 171 angstroms. You see that filament there? as well as some activity kicking off right here. Looks like a little bit of plasma collapsed back onto the corona there, or I'll say the chromosphere. You can see that little bit of activity there. It looks almost like a lightning bolt. And there's that coronal hole rotating out as another one's rotating in. A little more diffuse, but well enough defined to be visible in the 171 angstroms view. And it's about that time. Expect another video coming out today, folks. No disclosure on what it will be. When you're staring at the sun, don't drink. And if you drink, stare at the sun anyway, just don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, may that solar wind be at your back and that atherosclerosis absent from your veins.